All right, Happy New Year, everyone. Well, welcome. This is Kristen Vincent, Chair of the Westborough School Committee. Today is Wednesday, January 5th, 2022. This meeting of the Westborough School Committee is called to order. Please stand if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you for joining us this evening. Effective today, Wednesday, January 5th, 2022, the Westborough Board of Health requires that everyone, including fully vaccinated people, wear masks in indoor public settings in Westborough. The masking requirements apply to all individuals aged 2 years and above. Masks are to be worn completely over a person's nose and mouth. This order is in effect until January 31st, 2022, and may be extended to a further date if the Board of Health deems it necessary. I'd like to notify everyone in the room with us tonight that this meeting is being recorded by Westborough TV. School committee meetings are available for remote viewing or listening on Westborough TV's government channels, Verizon 28 and Charter 192, and online on the Westborough TV YouTube channel. And thank you to Westborough TV for covering this broadcast tonight. We have with us tonight Superintendent Amber Bach, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Daniel Mayer, Director of Finance and Administration David Gordon, Vice Chair of the Westborough School Committee Steve Durrett, School Committee members Sarah Dulé, Lisa Edinburgh, and Raghu Nandan. And we have staff from Westborough TV here as well. I'll just quickly run through our agenda. We're going to have an approval of minutes from December 15th, 2021 regular session. Then we'll move into the superintendent's report, assistant superintendent's report, and director of finance and administration's report. We'll have school committee member reports, building project updates, citizens' requests. Then we'll have a fall season athletics update, a COVID update and discussion. We'll have a vote to accept a donation from Looters Environmental. We will look at a draft of the strategic plan. We will discuss a proposed change to the March 1st professional development date that is on our school district calendar. We will vote to approve a request for an international trip to France, Germany, and the Alps in April of 2023. We will look at the Assabet Valley Collaborative's second quarterly report, and then we will adjourn. There's no need for an executive session tonight. So we'll begin with an approval of minutes from December 15th, 2021 regular session.
I make a motion to approve the December 15th amended minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion about the minutes?
Yes,
Okay, just get a little closer to your microphone.
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
it's hard with the mask.
That's okay. Under school committee reports, a sentence to be added to Ms. Edinburgh's comments. Please add, this included how she adhered and listened to the Westborough Board of Health and Mass Department of Public Health for guidance and many recommendations from August 10th to December 1st.
Thank you. Any other discussion about the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's 5-0, approved the minutes. I will turn it over to our superintendent. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy New Year. It is good to be here and to be able to provide updates early into our return. Most of my discussion points around kind of how we manage the week related to continuing contact tracing and work during vacation, so I'll speak about that during the COVID update, but I want to acknowledge that I think faculty really worked to slow down, take a break, spend some time with family, and to come back knowing that it was going to be potentially, a stressful week, prepared to get students off to a good start. I feel like the first 3 days of school have looked really good for kids. I think it's been stressful transition back for faculty, and I think I just want to make an open commendation to kind of the professionalism by which they create a sense of normalcy for kids pre-K to 22 and kind of get right back to the business of what they need to do, making adjustments as needed. I was able to see a lot of faculty when they were picking up test kits, and so I was able to interact with people, and I think they definitely, while they continue to demonstrate aspects of anxiety about how hard things are, they also were able to say that they'd had some rest over vacation. I'm hopeful that, they're feeling they can manage where we are. I want to just acknowledge that that takes ongoing maintenance, and I want to give a shout out to Westborough faculty and say thank you for getting our schools open Monday smoothly, and I appreciate them. I'll do the rest of my updates when I get to you actually, I'm going to do two others. Daniel and I split them. Sorry, Daniel. Typically, we do a DEI and an SEL update for you, and so I'll do the DEI update.
DEI updates.
Thank you, got it.
There, yeah.
What?
You're,
Oh, yeah, I got him.
yeah.
We wanted to make sure we acknowledged and shared, sorry, we're rusty, we had a week off. We haven't had much time to even talk to each other to get ready. We won, as a district level, a $42,821 grant, which is part of the statewide teacher diversification pilot program grant, and we applied to be able to support paraeducators and other educators and people that work for us in district who might be seeking an alternative or supported pathway towards becoming teachers. And the grant design allows us to support them through helping with certifications and coursework and mentoring. So I'm really pleased, thanks to Daniel for writing a strong grant, and we'll keep you updated on how, it's a fast-track grant in the sense that all of that has to be expended this year to the end of July, so. August, sorry, so we'll be busy at play with that. We also want to follow up too, following the incidences and the communications we had sent out regarding the issues of graffiti at the high school. On Tuesday, December 21st, soon after those events, students and staff actually generated ideas for how to best counteract acts of anti-Semitism and racism. And I think I want to just applaud the framework of a stop and pause, which we had talked about, and creating a framework where it wasn't just have discussion, it was to be ideas centered and looking towards a strength-based approach of empowerment of students and faculty to collaborate together around productive ideas. Students have proposed a series of events that will be taking place over the next couple of weeks that they think speak to the issues that represent them and things that they want to continue to raise their voices on. More information on those events will be forthcoming to families or parents and students as needed, and we'll be able to provide summaries for you after those types of things occur so you know they're an example of those highlights. Meanwhile, our administrators and faculty continuing our work with Dr. Liza Tucson, developing kind of next steps for tiers of training. We're also very, very cognizant of not overloading faculty right now around initiative work, and so the next trajectory for layer of training, I think realistically we're looking toward that after February break to begin to think about a second tier of work. Again, we want to interact with faculty on that, but that planning continues to move forward. And I just want to speak to the fact that I think as a team and as a district, being able to be transparent and also committing to making sure that we follow up with people and that we have follow through are things that continue to be important, and there will be continued work on our part as the year moves forward. And I think that's my update for now, and I'll turn it over to Daniel, who has the second part of those.
Okay. Good evening. I have two updates, one having to do with social emotional learning, and the grant that we also received. Both of these grants we heard about in December, just before we went away on break. So social emotional learning, we applied for a grant through Metro West Foundation, and they gave out somewhere in the order of 10 grants or something like that. We were one of the only, if not the only, school district that applied and got a grant. I don't know who applied, but of the list, we were, a school district that, and I guess maybe they historically don't necessarily fund school district for this kind of work, but they were admiring of our partnership with the Riverside Trauma Center and the screening that we're doing at the high school level. And so this grant is $57,000 to be expended over the next 2 years to help facilitate ongoing work with both Riverside and expanding our screening into the middle school. And so I'm, really proud of, Roger Anderson, Kim Tynan, the wellness team for their, standing out and doing such amazing work that we got that grant. So, and then the other update I wanted to give you is something totally different. It's having to do with our world language program. Some of you, maybe all of you, know about the Seal of Biliteracy. It's a state initiative to basically, they approve school districts to give a Seal of Biliteracy on a diploma of students to encourage high schools to emphasize the importance of world language. And so students are high functioning and proficient in English and another language, then they could get like this seal of biliteracy, which says that they've attained that in 2 or more languages. They are able to speak fluently. And the state, again, this is a shout out to our educators here who have done a fabulous job. They basically signaled us out as an exemplary district and asked us and one other school district to lead a seminar for other school districts next week. They looked at that we had 63 students, which is 20% of our graduating class, that had that seal of biliteracy last year. And they then invited both Bobby Sullivan, our world language coordinator, and also Eleanor Brown, who's our seal of biliteracy testing coordinator, to join representatives from the Department of Education, I guess it's next Tuesday, to run this workshop for other school districts. So I thought that was pretty good, so.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm smiling under my mask, but congratulations to everyone on that. I do remember at graduation, so many students were recognized for that, and several in 3 languages, which was amazing. Yeah, really good. Thank you. Thanks. And good news about that grant, too. That'll really be helpful. Thanks. Dave, do you have anything to share now? Okay. Oh, we don't even have, oh, sorry. Bring one over for you. There you go, I got it.
Just a very brief update. I just wanted to, I guess first and foremost, give a shout out and recognize the business office and my team, which I've tried to do from here and there, and I think I should do more of, but it's been a very supportive group, not only through my starting the journey here, but they've transitioned themselves into new roles and things, and new responsibilities, supporting each other. And I just wanted to recognize them because they do some good work and keep the district flowing. The update I have is in preparation for the budget summit on the 27th of this month. Starting to gather some data from some of our other peer districts. Again, as I mentioned in past meetings, I want to make sure some of it's relevant as opposed to the apples to oranges, but really starting to build those relationships and interaction with other school business officials in some of our school districts to make sure that any relevant information is being gathered and able to share to allow us to do some relevant benchmarking. Also, what comes with the meeting, there could be additional slides, but again, it's really just a preparation for the budget meeting on the 27th. I'll probably have more updates as we get closer to it. as it relates to state funding and things of that nature. But for right now, that's really what we're focused on, is the gathering of information, and ensuring that our presentation at the summit is pretty airtight. That's it.
Thank you.
You also got your budget books.
Yes, thank
So
you.
those have been disseminated, and it's a combination of electronic dissemination for people that selected that, and then budget books to the people that need them, and they all went out. I want to just, again, as he said, shout out to his team, and that they got that done quickly, which is much appreciated. And then I think Dave and I met tonight, talked a little bit about capital, and I think we just need to really wait and see how that plays out. I think it's kind of a missing piece in the package of what pieces we have coming forward to town meeting, and I think they're working diligently on it. I just think their timeline is waiting for some other numbers to come in. So we'll keep you updated on that. I'm hopeful by the next school committee meeting we have a little bit more information.
Thank you. So we'll move into school committee member reports. So we'll start with Sarah. Do you have a report from Andrew?
I do. Andrew could not be with us tonight, so he sent me a few notes. This is what Andrew says. Students are settling back into school smoothly while returning to full masking. Fails enjoyed a fun school meeting before break on Zoom with a sing-along. They're working to schedule a date for the new building's open house, which will be open to the entire Westborough community. Hastings students are spending time working with their teachers on setting new learning goals for 2022 and focusing on honesty in January. High school teachers have been discussing with students their plans for the midterms, which won't be as high stakes as they have been in the past. And also, Andrew noted that he's seen an uptick of COVID cases and absences due to COVID at the high school following the holiday break. That's Andrew's report, and
And do you have anything?
I don't think I have anything tonight.
Okay, thanks. Raghu? I don't know. Okay, thank you. Lisa?
No, I'm just taking in about Amber and Daniel's reports, and I'm looking forward to hearing about the collaboration of faculty and students for the stop and pause of DEI work, and also to know that our district is demonstrating certain programs that other districts are attempting to emulate, including the biliteracy program and immersion program that we have for world languages, but also there's been talk about Shrewsbury attempting to replicate the borough program, working in that direction, which again, I don't know if people know that Amber has presented about the borough program to other districts at the Mass Conference a couple of years ago, and hoping that others would start to do such good work. So I appreciate what you've both done, and it's a lot of good work happening in our district, and kudos to the World Language Department and the DEI committee and the work that's is happening and about to happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Steve, I don't have anything to report either, so you're welcome to move into your report and your building project updates.
Okay, as a school committee member, my update is Happy New Year to everybody. Who would have thought we got here with all the other things going on? And so that's my point for this one. And as far as the building updates go, the work at Hastings on the sprinkler system is almost 2/3 done. As I mentioned last time, that work goes forward after school and on weekends and at night, and it's progressing quite well. There have been one or two glitches in the beginning, but the contractor is with diligence proceeding and getting the work done. For those who've been by the Fales School, the old Fales building is gone. It's been demolished. There are piles of rubble around which are being sorted for those things that can be recycled, such as bricks go to one place, concrete goes to another, and so on. And so as that gets sorted, there's also a review of all the components in the piles to make sure that if there are any hazardous materials, that they get found and properly identified and then removed from the site and put where they need to go. As far as the schedule for the completion, I guess, of the removal of the old school, it's estimated that it'll probably be completed by the end of this month or early the first week in February. at which point the foundation hole can be backfilled, compacted, and the other items such as spring planting eventually, and the recreation of the athletic field would occur between now and hopefully June, give or take. So that work progresses. As far as the new school building is concerned, when the school was occupied, we had over 1,100 punch list items to figure out, such as doors that didn't latch, or doors that dragged, or closures that didn't work, and all of the kinds of things that happen when you're doing a whole project at once. That list of items has now been reduced to about 70 items, of which some are multiples because they are same thing but occur in different disciplines of work, and so they get counted twice. That work is proceeding, and of course, one of the things that goes with that kind of work is it happens after school or at night or sometimes on weekends, and so it takes a while to get through all of that stuff. I'm happy to announce that the two-way electric meter was installed last Thursday, which means that our solar generation is offsetting the needs of the school, and when we have excess generation, it goes out on the network, and the meter records it as being a credit, if you will, to the town, because the system as designed should generate more electricity over the year, over the year, than what the Fields building will need. What that means under net metering, which was part of the program here, is that excess generation can be used to credit power bills for other schools, which means ultimately that the generation for Fales, as planned, will offset our power bills at other locations. And I can tell you yesterday, for those who remember yesterday, which was a cloudless sky, bright blue, that the system at Fales peaked at 316 kilowatts against its original design amount of 400 kilowatts per hour at the peak, and that was just about noontime. And because the sky was clear and there weren't any clouds that covered the sun, it was a perfect bell curve in terms of the way it started, slightly before 6 o'clock in the morning, and basically shut down around 4:12 or so in the afternoon. So far, it's operating just exactly like it was designed, and we're hopeful that it will continue. So that's my update.
That's great. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Steve?
Just so unbelievably exciting to imagine a revenue stream coming from the roof of Fales. It's really extraordinary, the work that's been done, and thank you, because I don't know if you could see me smiling, because it was great.
And I think we've been lucky with the weather in terms of the demolition of the old Fales building and getting the materials in and out of there, and I feel like hopefully we can continue to have the weather cooperating on that and not have it all covered in snow and ice. Any other questions for Steve about building? Thank you. Thank you, as always, for your detailed reports. So we'll move into citizens' requests. Is there anyone here tonight who wishes to make a statement to the school committee? Come on up. And just as a reminder, if you could state your name and street address, and then just make sure you're speaking into the microphone.
Lloyd Conklin, 8 Water Street,
Yeah.
Westborough.
Thanks.
So I guess I'll do my own COVID update from the information I get versus the information of the state, the politicians, the NIH, the FDA, and Big Pharma. My information is quite different from what you get and apparently believe. So I guess we're in our own rainbow wonderlands. But anyways, there's a Joe Rogan podcast with Dr. Robert Malone that was just aired, no longer taken off of YouTube, of course, but you can see it on BitChute. One thing, science without discussion is propaganda, and some call it scientism, not science. There's been 840,000 COVID deaths, and supposedly 500,000 of those would be preventable, would have been preventable because of the suppression of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin for early treatment that has been done by the FDA and pharma to collude to outlaw those two, so that the emergency use authorization of the vaccine could go forward. They couldn't have any other treatments available for the disease. The increased risk of vaccination after infection. So if you get vaccinated afterwards, it can cause complications from the vaccine. 140 studies, natural immunity is superior to the vaccine-induced immunity. Once again, the suppression of misinformation, this misinformation of the kind of information I have, by the Trusted News Initiative, which is a governmental put forth to supposedly, monitor the misinformation of elections, which we've seen, like the Trump suppression. Everything Trump that's bad is pushed forward, everything Trump is good is buried, kind of thing. So it's the same thing for the vaccine, the same power play, propaganda play. The NIH director, Francis Collins, and Fauci collude to smear the Massachusetts Great Barrington Declaration. Those emails just came out by Judicial Watch, by Freedom of Information Act. And then once again, I talked about the Hong Kong study where 1 in 2,700 boys hospitalized with myocarditis after the vaccine.
Thank you. That's 3 minutes.
3 minutes is up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for citizens' requests? Great, we'll move on to our next agenda item, fall season athletics update.
Thank you. I will present the summary that, so when we had developed I'm waiting for Daniel to get to the right one, you'll get there. Thank you. Part of our work around the development of the athletic fields at the high school was to make sure that we kind of gave the school committee an annual summary of just the number of nights we had events and the protocol reminders. I think, making sure that we hold on to the historical record of process and make sure that we reiterate it and that we also follow through on our commitments for updating you and then also staying within the parameters of the number of night games we agreed to, all of those types of things. I think that this report provides that summary for you. The appendix is the original report that we provided when we developed the fields that set the parameters for the number of games and the way we would manage the fields. I'm pleased to report that I think we're operating well within those parameters and I think able to successfully hold a fall season that was the most typical fall season we've seen in a while. And most of our teams were able to play under the lights. You remember that EEE shut down the system before, and then we had fragmentation of athletics with COVID, not as much into the fall, but certainly winter. If you look at the expected annual report, you want to see attached there an opportunity for you to get an update on the fall game schedule so you can see the number of games that were played on the fields. And historically, The other historical note really centers around the sound system and the adjustments that we made when we did the additional testing in August 23rd. And I attached that update more for historical remembrances, that we did a kind of a wider net sound test out at multiple sites across town, and then could bring that data back together and utilized that to adjust the sound system. At that time, the interesting thing that's to note about that is that following that feedback from people and the sound system grab we did at distances at different, like down Church Street in different areas, we then locked the sound system at height levels that can't go above a certain level. So we worked for that day to kind of, listen to a variety of play, and then locked the system so that it could be managed. The case is actually locked, so you can't go in and fiddle with those. And so one of the things that was a part of, and Sarah is the person who has always taken point on getting the sound system checked for us, which I really appreciate, and she was able to confirm, like, that is still true. We haven't adjusted them since that original adjustment, and they seem to be within parameters that are accepted. We can lower them, but they can't go higher than a certain place. So the update around the overall season highlights, I think, the on-off record is also attached for you, so you can see when the lights, anytime the lights come on, it creates a record, and when they go off. So that's it right there, logistically, exactly the amount time and time off. And they can give you the early shut-off records where she goes in and she manually shuts it down because the game ended early. And it was slated to go, the lights would be on till 10. They tend to go off closer to like 9:15. So I think the record is there for you to peruse, and I'd be happy to answer questions. And if I can't answer the explicit questions about it, Johanna, I will get back to you, or Brian, quickly. I think an important part around the lights have always centered on why are the lights on when school's over. And so the track team actually runs a pretty late practice in the fall. They don't even begin until 5 in some cases, so they finish up, and then the lights are on at the turnoff time is usually 7:30, unless they're using them later, and then it's an 8 o'clock shut off. So that the combination of teams out there practicing, but also then the community use, which is fairly steady. And typically the track team and the community walkers will just mix together and use, they also have people that come out and use the field itself to do field-based workouts. And so I think in general, we feel good about the community use of the site. Oftentimes people just enjoy walking down. They know it's well lit, and they can move through the campus and see what people are doing, and then head on out with the rest of their walk. So I think at this point, it's the one thing that we tend to take questions on with the lights, and I think we've tried to make sure we reiterate it, and I wanted to make sure I codified it in the report. Regarding the sound check, Kevin Autachi conducted the sound system current implementation at our Thanksgiving Day game. We try to pick a loud game and one that's well attended, and their report is attached. They indicate very similar sound levels to the 2019 report, and that we continue to monitor and get feedback from people and make adjustments during a game if needed, if we get a call. I think an interesting piece to note, and I'll talk about that in a second, and then I will actually make one of the recommendations I want you to consider, and you can see it's in the paragraph there on the sound system report. The noise complaints that we get, we promised that we would make sure that we record them and that they're annualized, so we can make sure that we are committed to that. There weren't any formal noise complaints received by the police regarding the sound system. We did have a few concerns that were communicated directly to the high school principal this fall season. One was that they thought the PA was too loud on those occasions, and two, there was a call about 2 concerns over the level of music that the band was playing, that the drum section was too loud. So that's a harder thing to modulate, but I think we certainly acknowledge that was, they weren't complaining about the band, they were complaining about the general noise, and I think recognizing that we can't necessarily turn them down in the same way, and those come in bursts and then they're done, usually short stints of performance. But I noticed that, again, in terms of making sure that we report it, I think people are continuing to find ways to access us if they have a concern they want to bring forward. And I think overall we feel that the implementation is stable. I wanted to give a shout out to the fact that we held a homecoming event, and there was music for a very long extended amount of time in the fall, and the community was so supportive, and even actually putting calls to say how happy it made them to hear the music and know the kids were getting an event. So we have such a good quality of community here in Westborough. I think there's just a sense of recognition that when they hear that noise, there's good things happening for kids. I want to conclude by just saying it was a very successful season. The community came out to support our teams, and we hosted multiple home MIA games, girls soccer team on their journey to the semifinals. So it was a good season. I would like you to consider a recommendation. You don't need to act on it at this time. You can just table it. I can put it to you and you can think about it, and we can act on it another time. But I mean, at this time, it would be my recommendation that we no longer conduct the annual test of the sound system unless it's requested for a specified set of reasons. If there's an inquiry or a spat of concerns that were to escalate, where we would have a question where we would want to go in and retest the system or gather another sound sample, I certainly think, yes, we would be very willing to do it. But annually expensing between $3,000 and $4,000, seems, it's not an insignificant annual expense, and we remain very committed to it if it's a report that people feel strongly they get. So I just want you to, think about it. And again, I think, I believe that we could relinquish that and maintain this annual report and then activate a sound check if we felt we needed to. The system is currently locked in at the same rates that they're going to end up reporting now year over year. So if you think about a noise capture report, we locked the system after working with them and set the sound mechanisms, so they're not going to see much variability. I mean, the level of noise is kind of generalized at this point. So I'm not sure that it gives us the fruits of the cost to, we were looking to see if we see variability, but actually you're going to see more continuity because the system's capped. And that's my interpretation of the data, and I just want you, as you reflect on the attachments in this report, we can bring it back at a certain point in the future and consider it.
Okay.
And that's my report on the fall season.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have questions or comments for Amber?
Go ahead. So I'm really wondering, how did we decide how loud it should be? Meaning that I know we've done these tests and I could see the 5 different data points.
Yeah.
Giving us a range of, how much change there was and what our limits have been put on the sound system. How do we decide how much to go in each direction?
Yep.
And I didn't see on the map, there's 3 different locations called SM1, 2, and 3. I didn't see number 3. Is it because we didn't test 3?
Yeah, they do run the sound monitor there, but they kind of focus on the one, not that there's not neighbors back there too, but the sound and the way our speakers are, they were projecting more out towards Roche Brothers, if you will, or the east. So I don't know what direction that is, but towards Roche Brothers. So the sound monitor there on Charles Street and then the one back on Ruggles Street were the ones in terms of the report that they really focused on.
Okay, and so that helps me understand it. And then, is there some kind of comparison to what the sound was before the new system versus what we have now?
The very first, if you look at that
2017?
report, I'm going to get the date wrong, it was probably 2016 or 17, that was a night game under the lights when we brought in generators and lights. That was,
There's a baseline to
yeah,
work
that
off
was the
of.
baseline one.
So the other piece to enhance what Sarah's saying
With
is...
the old system, sorry.
Right, sorry. Historically, I think the other piece of that is when we did that sound system monitoring, what was the target? The target was to then take sound system reads, we did it over several hours, and then turn the speakers and then run it again and get another report on the improvement. And the goal was to basically have the speakers loud enough that you could be over by the snack shack, you could be along the walkway there, you could sit up on the walkway in the back, if you wanted to sit at the top on the viewing area, that you could hear the game. And that it doesn't blow the people out that are in the stands right in front of the speakers. So it was kind of a good art form of basically turning each of the speakers in the right direction to provide the appropriate sound for the different group it was supposed to target, and then diminish it down to the smallest radius of impact beyond that, so that it was audible and enjoyable without being too loud. So that was our target. And then across the span, for example, we had people that would stand at right by the snack shack and say, okay, it's real loud, you can bring it down here. And then somebody at the hedge who was like, I can still hear it, pull it down a little bit. So, we just used a methodology with, I think we had a dozen people that were helping us that day. And then we basically then used that to baseline and lock the system in. And that's the approach we took. And I think that now you can listen in the stands without it being uncomfortable, but then there's a better projection when you turn the speaker that has to head towards the snack shack, and we opted to take it off by a quarter turn, so it goes more into the parking lot and towards the tennis courts. And so that's the type of small adjustments we made that I think kind of stabilized our work.
That's in that August 23rd.
Yeah.
That's a more,
Yeah, and Matt Moore from Kavanaugh Touchy also came that day and listened, and he's the one who made the recommendations about where your speakers are positioned and how we could get it better towards the field. Or towards the stands. We moved one from one of the poles to the top of the press box and pointed it down so people right there could hear. And then, as Amber said, turned the other one towards the concession stand.
In the committee or the group of neighbors that came to us 3 years ago to hear about the lights and the schedule and the sound, have they seen this report to understand that there's a limit that's been put on them? Or is it that you're just waiting for them to request it?
No, it's been on our, it's been on our website.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been on our website since then.
And we did a push, the year we did the April 23rd report, we shared that out with a range of people, neighbors that wanted to, and they were clear that they would share it, share it amongst their email lists. We did keep, we had an email grouping for a while, but a lot of the names have changed in the transition. It's been several years now, so we don't utilize that one anymore. But again, I think the idea was that we would provide a maintenance of effort and a focus and commitment and be responsive should there be questions. And I think this report will continue to be that anchor.
Okay.
It's certainly a shared responsibility that if somebody has a concern, they need to reach out to us. I think we're continuing to try to, again, work responsively with people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when you hear about, oh, that game was really loud or whatever, it really just depends on the person in the press box and how close they are to the microphone and how much their voice is carrying across the field. And that's an easy adjustment to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I was going to say is I do feel we have stayed true with this report to the original parameters that we discussed and made those adjustments. And in terms of doing the report annually, I would be fine with not doing that specific report, but in Kavanaugh Touchy is, they do our inside work as well. So, we're in contact with them and would come out at any time to, provide guidance or advice or something. But also the one of the concerns had been of the neighbors was limiting the access to the system, which I know Amber said we set the levels, but as she said too, just to reiterate, that press box is locked. It has a very two people probably that could access the sound system in there, and it's been the same people consistently for the past 3 or 4 years. So there's really no randomness to it, which, like I said, was a concern. And they did provide guidance at that time. Mr. Callahan worked on guidance for announcers, and those are posted in the press box as well and have been there. And we haven't really had many instances where, maybe because of COVID also, but, youth football would go in and use it or something like that. It's, annually, the baseball parade, things like that have kind of died down. But when those come back, it's still very limited access. They can't change the levels. And there's guidance in there for how you should be using the system or the announcing.
No, I appreciate hearing that. And the other piece that people often ask about is the money for the lights.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're looking at the report right now that says exactly what the expenditures are, specifically for all the time that the lights have been on to get us one monthly average and then also a total savings when the energy is saved from early offs. So we're looking at that, and people have this perception that it's considerably high when it's actually considerably low. But that's one of the questions people have. They go by the field, they miss the runners that had just been there, and they see nobody on the field as it's snowing. But people actually come even when it's snowing. I've been there when it's snowing, and people do use it. And if you happen to drive by and no one's there, you have this perception that no one's using it. But it's just not simply true. Many people use the track from the community on a regular basis, and sometimes you see them and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
We do usually hit that point each year where it snows a foot or it's super icy and you need to, just end it for a few weeks or, a month or so. So we haven't hit that point yet because the weather's been pretty mild. So maybe by Friday, we'll hit start to hit that point.
Yeah, I think we wanted an invested community use, and I feel good about that. I mean, the upper field gets a lot of use as well. Sure. So that's the report. You can dig through those appendices. I think the questions were excellent, and we remain committed to the investment of the town being able to access that and enjoy it as well. So that's our report.
Great, thank you. And this will be posted on the website, because you said the other reports were on there.
Yeah, I know Andrea, I can ask Andrea tomorrow too, but she had posted this and then updated it every time we were updated, so.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great.
Question?
The average cost for lighting is
Yeah, it's very low.
very low.
Yeah.
Well, the other side of the coin is that, in fact, those that participate in sports that use the field are also paying a fee. And in fact, we use that fee to offset things that are expensive to the school committee and the school administration. So it's not like somebody out there who has no interest in the field or football or anything else is paying for it specifically as part of the game plan. The kids that use it are paying a fee to be able to use it and be on the team or whatever other sports are using the field. So I believe the questions about how much it costs the, quote, town is a red herring, because it doesn't cost the town anything. It costs the kids that use the field based on their activity fee, for which the activity fee covers that expense as well as many others.
Right, and I certainly think it's appropriate whenever people want to ask us around our fiscal responsibilities, which is why in the report I'm very specific that paying $3,000 to $4,000 for a sound report that's not giving us new data is more concerning to me than the cost of the lights for a value that's added where the lights are on and the community people, even if it's 10 people, are enjoying that at the cost of our coverage for them to enjoy the services of the school. So again, I think, you need to put some consideration into that. And we want to be responsive, but we want to be responsible. Mm-hmm. So at this point, I don't consider it responsible of us fiscally to spend that money unless we're getting a specific set of requests. Yep. All right?
Yeah,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. So we'll move on to our COVID updates and discussion. And I know there have been a lot of emails sent out and a lot of contact tracing and a lot of people home. So
all right. So I'll keep my comments, try to prepare them thoughtfully. Again, I want to begin with a thank you to the quality of faculty, with our nursing staff, our admin team, and our teachers on the ground. And when I say teachers, all of our educational staff, our paraeducators, our cafeteria staff, our noon aides, our custodial staff. You have 700 people working across the district to provide the quality of educational service and to run our district, and they do an incredibly good job to come with a continuity of service each day. and they returned from vacation and dug right in, and I just have immense respect for them. I want to give a special shout out to, during the vacation week, one of our targeted goals as a leadership team was to give our nurses a break. Nurses have been a spectacular strength of where we are. Judy Noonan, our nurse leader, just a quality leader. I want to give a shout out to Jennifer Sullivan, the Director of Board of Health. We agreed that Jennifer and the principals and I would partner together to take on the contact tracing work that would occur during vacation. And in order to then give the nurses a break and to give teachers a break, we pulled class lists, and then we could just work with the small nucleus of the 6 principals and Jen and myself to manage the contact tracing over vacation. During that time, we had a report of 100 cases that came in across the span of that week. So, you know, I think they were as kind of a smattering each day that came in, but there was a backlog in testing results, and so we would get a chunk of them. So we did get, and I don't think people were upset about it, I think they understood it, that we were calling people, say on Wednesday the 27th or the 28th, to say, we have to contact trace back to that Thursday, because we were in school, and the person tested and they had symptoms, but we didn't get the test till now. So, you know, there was some of that, and so managing it took some time and energy. I just want to give a shout out to the principals who did a really good job to have those conversations, and Jen was spot on texting me and helping me to figure it all out. So that was how vacation was managed, and I'm hoping it gave the rest to the most needy, which was our nurses and our teachers. So following that 100 reported cases, those are the ones that people took the time to call and tell us. And I think there were other people that were sick and tested and stayed home that are following up now in these first kind of 3 days. They never sent their kid back, or they had COVID during vacation and then they've been past their window and they're returning, but they're just giving us their reports now. So since Monday, so I'll give you the numbers. So since Monday, this is working with Judy, just by the end of today, we have 144 cases that have been reported to us across district. Now, the vast majority of those cases have not been in school. Those are students that have been home sick and have now, parents are calling and reporting that they kept them home and that their COVID test has come through and that they are positive. There's a portion of each of those that are students that have been in school now, you know, typically across these 3 days. For example, I think there were 12 cases today at the high school, and I think 3 of them, might be 4, Brian hadn't confirmed, were in school. So we picked them up as test and stay in school because they came down with symptoms, and we tested them, they were positive, and we sent them home. Of those 12, others were calls coming in from parents who were just finally, you know, being able to take a moment and call and say, look, John's out, he's had COVID, his test was done on this date. So, and if you look at the breakout, it's a fair bell curve distribution of size across the schools, which we've seen as a statistical kind of behavior of our illness thus far. You know, Armstrong has had 12 cases over the 3 days, Fales has had 6, Hastings has had 10, Mill Pond's at 28, but that's almost 900 students there. It's bigger than Gibbons. Gibbons had 29. The high school has seen 54 cases. The boroughs had 3, and WEC has had 2. It's kind of, you know, a bell curve of that transition. A vast majority of those are vaccinated breakthrough cases. There are some in that mix that were in that original set of unvaccinated that we track. And of those numbers, of the 144, I believe that, I think like 21 of them are teachers. So we did have in the original 100 the week before, I think, oh, here we go, 29 staff in the original 100, and then another 20 this week. So, you know, we do have staff that are out. Some we picked up on the test and stay. The vast majority of them tested during vacation because they were symptomatic. So certainly those numbers follow the national, you know, the national issue of how quickly the Omicron virus is kind of like, you know, picking up. So from that standpoint, that's the data. I think that we are experiencing then the close contact tracing calls. So I think the close contact tracing calls, because of the radius of how we do those, that picks up a lot of people. So that's up around 300 people that are going to get a call because we test and stay the whole class at the elementary level. There's certainly a discussion taking place amongst schools and amongst DESC and DPH about modifying the close contact call structure. And I think I wouldn't anticipate, we see it when we see it. Right now, I think it's important for families to understand that we're bound by the parameters of DESC and DPH's guidelines to implement contact tracing. So all schools are doing that. But they also are responsively speaking to these groups back, to DPH and DESC, saying, at this point, structurally, many people would say we all need to consider ourselves close contacts and monitor for symptoms, given that we're out in the world as well as at work, and that from there, we should focus on tracking unvaccinated students who need to quarantine, and that there's a better way to do this that wouldn't have components of you getting 3 voice calls in a day. So I think, again, I want parents to recognize that, we're bound by that structure and we're working to do a good job with following up. And people appreciate knowing, but there's a saturation to that, so I think there's a balance there that school districts are now seeking some guidance on. I'll certainly, keep you posted on that. If that were to change, it would come through a notice and an outline and all of that. So I think the important salient points for tonight is that we're maintaining all our current protocols. At all of the buildings, they've been working to extend moving kids further apart at snack, giving them snack spots in the elementary school so that they're not, wandering around the classroom while they eat snack, but they have a set spot and kind of push them out to better distancing. They are monitoring getting kids further spread apart at lunches. And again, I wrote about that already, but I think it's just important to reiterate that. I recognize that. And then getting kids outside, even when it's cold, really trying to, maximize getting outside for those breaks and things. Beyond that, I think we'll continue to meet to make adjustments as needed, but right now we're going to focus on implementing the protocols that we have. We know that we say to people, if you're symptomatic, stay home, but that's probably the single best tool that limits contact tracing, is if people are doing that to monitor symptoms. But we also know that for many people, it's very mild symptoms, and therefore it's, it's a hard call for people. I don't think that people are in any way deliberately ignoring that and not being responsible. I mean, in the winter, how many people wake up with a sniffle and they don't know what to do? So we're trying to make people aware. I think people are being very diligent. And we just have to manage where we are. So last piece, we did a testing distribution. I'm sure you saw about this in the news, which just kind of happened very quickly, but DESE made a dissemination of several 100,000 test kits available to faculty so they could test before a return to school. It was kind of nice to get a benchmark where people could be clear that they felt like either they found out they were positive before they returned or they knew they were good to come back. We were able to implement that really smoothly. I would give a shout out to Jack Foley and Matt Lefebvre and Chris Martin, who helped me by coming in, and we assembled kits and got to visit with people when they came in and picked them up. And I think people really appreciated that we distributed our kits such that every staff and faculty in the district who work for us, all 700, could receive a test if they wanted. And so I think we were able to cover community ed. Anybody who works with us and works with kids or cleans our buildings or is developing food, all of them are of equal value, and we need to make sure that all of them felt that they could come receive a test, check on things, and talk to a nurse if they needed to. So I felt good about how we were able to kind of pull that together quickly. And again, I think people need to anticipate that we're going to continue to give updates. We'll continue to track where we are, and the trajectory of numbers means that you'll see more absences, but because we are so highly vaccinated, people are in a monitor for symptoms phase, and that does come with a responsibility in that, you're able to attend school, you're not being sent home to quarantine because we're so highly vaccinated, but it does put the weight on monitoring symptoms.
Right.
So that's my report for now. I think everybody in the industry believes that the next 3 weeks are going to be bumpy, that they're going to be stressful, that there's a little unknown in terms of, how many cases we'll see or whether they'll level out, whether or not this week was really heavy, because all of these cases are, pretty much vacation cases. And that was understandable. People anticipated that. You had New Year's Eve on Saturday, you had Christmas, you had holiday breaks, you had people traveling. So I think there was an anticipated sense that we might see an increase. The question is this the level we're gonna see every day? Will it increase? We're just gonna have to monitor it. I'm happy to send you updates and give you, a daily if you need it. I think we'll just be watching it closely and see, what it tells us.
Sure.
Okay?
And so I also want to address something that we had originally set about the mask mandate at the high school and middle school and moving to flexible masking, that we had set January 10th as a time to resume flexible masking at the high school and middle school. And given the data that you just shared, Amber, and the general caseload here in Westborough and in Massachusetts and in the nation and what's happening with the new variant, and because the Board of Health has a townwide mask mandate right now for all public indoor spaces that goes through January 31st, I would propose that we move that date forward to February 2nd, which is actually the next school committee meeting after the Board of Health meets to reassess their own January 31st mask mandate deadline. And so at that Board of Health meeting, I feel like we'll get a lot of additional guidance. We'll have more data to see if this is, like you said, just the trend now, if it'll trend down. And that should give us a reasonable picture of when we might resume flexible masking again at the middle school and high school. So I would propose that we just direct all students and staff to continue masking regardless of vaccination status until February 2nd. Okay. And I was going to open it up for discussion among committee. We don't have to take a vote because this is just a change in implementation, but if anyone has feedback or would like to discuss, I'm happy to do that too.
So the next Board of Health meeting is January 18th?
Yep. And at that meeting, they're looking at their January 31st deadline. They're going to reconsider it and see if they want to keep it or extend it out or...
So should we be following their meetings, or should we be waiting? In other words, you're proposing the February 2nd, and our next meeting is the 19th.
19th.
So theirs is the 18th. So my question is, do we rediscuss on the 19th? Because it will be after their next meeting.
I don't think they're taking away the mask mandate for all public indoor spaces before January 31st.
Probably not, based on what their meetings seem to sound like, probably not. I was just thinking if we want their guidance, they may have different guidance on the 18th, and we may want to consider it whatever they say then. But I also understand the need for stability right now. When you hear about 144 cases, it's sort of undeniable that there's 144 cases, although one of the things with the Board of Health that made very clear at their meeting was there doesn't seem to be some accurate data about hospitalization and death. And so there's a perception that all the cases are no hospitalizations. And so do you take that into consideration, or do you also take into consideration that we have a certain absentee rate going on in our schools that could it be decreased by ensuring that, we continue the masking? But I also want to also bring up, since we're having a discussion, if we're talking about masking, the thing that we've never really talked about is the difference in masks. If we think that masks make a difference, it's interesting that we've never talked about surgical mask versus cloth mask versus KN95 mask. And I ask it because I don't really know the reason we started with surgical masks. Was that about availability? Was that about price? And we've never talked about KN95, which certainly has some more data about a safety layer. And is that about cost also? And I do believe that, the question becomes also about equity. If we're always supplying surgical masks, that means that's always available to anyone who doesn't have a surgical mask. Is the same thing true if we were to supply KN95 masks, or is that not an option because of cost? And I don't know the answer to those. So those are I just want to bring that to the discussion. Yeah.
Just make sure you're next to the microphone so everyone can hear you. Thanks. Oh, is it on?
No.
There you go.
There we go.
Oh, geez, all this time I've been. So I was listening to this NPR program on the effectiveness of the mask itself. And surely there is some debate on the effectiveness of cloth masks like this versus N95. And it is up for the debate on the effectiveness of masks itself, but at the same time, there is some amount of protection. It's not zero protection. There is some amount of protection that's given to those. My biggest concern in all of this is the population who are unvaccinated. I know vaccinated, if they get COVID, it's a mild symptom. It's just like a bad cold. That's what they say. No hospitalization. Eventually, in my mind, I could be totally wrong, this will turn into epidemic and taper off, and we have to live with that. But the biggest concern is the unvaccinated people. If they get infected, there has been hospitalizations for such populations. So whether it's the staff or the students, for whatever the reason they're unvaccinated, we need to protect. It's imperative upon us to protect them as well, as much as possible. To take steps to protect them as much as possible. So that's why I think it's better for us to, especially with this many cases at this point of time, I think it's prudent for us to go to 2 meetings from now. February 2nd is when we are meeting, and give the time for the cases to reduce and see how it goes, and then go from there.
Well, we talk about the masks and what the level of the masks are. Well, let's face it, if you don't wear it properly, it doesn't matter what kind of mask you have. And the discussions I've heard about what happens between classes in the high school versus in class is that a lot of kids don't wear them properly, that their nose is exposed. And the thing is, we sit here as members of the school committee listening to various advice that we get from various places, the news, special programs, the Board of Health. None of us really know, let's face it. And the prudent person would say, given everything that we've heard, given the fact that hundreds of thousands of people are being infected with this thing, and granted, at least the data seems to imply that this particular variant, for those who have been vaccinated, is much less problematic, and that most people seem to survive it okay. As a matter of fact, a meeting that I was supposed to have today was canceled because one of the primary people and everybody in his family was affected with COVID. I had another call this morning about a contractor that I work with in Illinois who couldn't do his job because he had COVID. So there is a point, I think, in life where we simply have to say, what does common sense tell us? And in my mind, common sense tells us that, in fact, we as members of the school committee who at least have an influence on the administration should be doing our best to try to put kids in the right place with the right advice. And given the fact that the Board of Health has recommended and tells everybody else in this town, including businesses, that people inside should be wearing masks. So why wouldn't we, for our kids in our school, at least for the duration of their recommendation, do the same thing. If we're not going to vote, then I think discussion ends and the administration has to do what they have to do.
Yep.
So anyway, I think we've all given an opinion, I think, of what we think about this, and that's mine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm fine with February 2nd also. I mean, it's only a couple days too past, and it does give another stretch of time to see where this is all going and what happened. With the masks, I think the Board of Health did an excellent job of discussing the different types of masks, which is, I know we didn't talk about it before, but I feel like with Omicron, it came to the forefront, and now, like you said, NPR, like more people are talking about the masks. So, I mean, maybe if we just drop in our frequently asked questions section, I don't know, I can find you a picture or something that, online that, goes through the different types of masks. And then I still think families can make their own decisions about the type of mask they send to school with their child. And we can obviously have surgical masks as backup. I know there's some, KN95s lying around there that, I know faculty shares with kids that, come in their class. Kid comes in without a mask or something. So, but I think the education piece is probably more important at this point than telling people what they need to do or need to have or whatever, in my opinion.
So, and I'll let Lisa comment on that. I have a couple comments on masks, but go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I didn't want to interrupt you if you want to, I look like you
No,
were gonna
I'm
say-
just curious if it's cost prohibitive. And why do I ask it is because if some kids are bringing their masks because they can't afford a mask, they're making their mask, and we supply a surgical mask at school as more protective, is there a reason we don't provide KN95 masks, which appear to be even more effective?
If they're available.
If they're available, right.
So I'll just give you, again, a couple general points. I was texting Kelly just to get a count on different things. There's active discussion, as you said, around which quality of masks are better. DESE disseminated cases of KN95s, but they're of a scalable difference between some of the masks that went out. So there's been a very active online discussion, and today DESE went back and qualified the differences between some of the masks they received and restated the efficacy of each around the percentage of kind of scalable protection. So I left that meeting today thinking that I wanted to look at the data that they had sent out and put together basically a mask update, because we have made them available to all faculty and they can have one a day if they need them. So, but they want to make sure that they feel that the quality of mask is, high quality. Certainly, as you look at it, at scalability, as Raghu said, like they all have some protective capacity that the better you go up with those different scales of different types of the KN95s and the different quality, you get a different level of protection. Everything we've received around that design is better than just a surgical mask. So, but there will be, again, options. I think product-wise, numbers-wise, whether or not we could make them available, we'd have to prioritize the layout and come up with a system. I mean, I think we have over 3,000. So we ordered a good amount of PPE. I mean, Kelly G. Capella is like a rock star about that stuff and really got out early and did a lot of ordering for us. So yes, we went with surgical masks, give little faces too, so those N95s, they don't fit little faces. Like, it's not as easy as, it's just not, none of it's easy. I guess we all know that if we've learned anything in the last, year, almost 2 years, is that none of it's easy. But, in terms of equity, feeling strongly that if a student wants to swing into the office and pick up a higher efficacy mask, we certainly can work to make those available. I would just have to design a structure for it so that I can make sure then that I have a count available. I certainly think, we can tackle that. That's certainly not a problem. I think it's a matter of equity, distribution, and balance, and first priority we made faculty in terms of that ordering. you could end up with way too many, and they could sit for 5 years in the back custodial office, or we could be short. It's just a hard call. I certainly think that the supply we have to date hasn't been tapped, and it's been an option for a while. A lot of people also don't like wearing them because they feel they're more restrictive. But the flip side is, if they feel that with the data around Omicron, they want to lead towards that, more of our staff have opted to take the masks we offered. So it's kind of fluid right now. I'm certainly happy to follow up. Let me do some counts. Let me look at the distribution quality, because we've been moving those boxes to buildings. Let me get an update, and I'll send you a follow-up memo, because I can include you in the update I put to staff around the different masks. So I have some work to do on that, and I'll follow up with you guys as well.
Okay, I was just curious if staff would feel more protected, if certain students would feel more protected, that, certain families would feel more protected. I'm not opposed to the February 2nd. I'm simply someone who thinks that this is an ebb and flow constant, even though I definitely read about water waste today and COVID and thought, oh, this is here for at least a few weeks based on that, but who knows? I mean, my belief is deciding anything way too far in advance is difficult, because you never know where we're going to be. But there's a lot of data that's pointing us to the end of the month, and I'm not opposed to that.
And also, for me, it's a feelings decision. There's a lot of anxiety. People are very quick to be upset, to blame, quick to anger, and I would like to just turn the temperature down a little by just saying we're all going to stay masked till February 2nd. That's also a feelings decision. I'll be very clear about that.
I think you could look at other benchmark dates that different boards and different people and different committees are setting, and you can get a general feel that they're pushing to the end of January. And the question is, how long and how fast does it burn? Does it follow the South Africa track, where it burns really hot and fast and then the numbers drop off? As I mentioned at the last time I did an update, if you look at the trajectory of how Delta peaked and then fell off, everybody's asking these questions, will this have the same trajectory? And so even at its best estimate, I think you'd be looking toward early February before you would see that drop to a place where people start to shift the practices that are in place right now. So I think having this quality of discussion puts you in alignment with both following the data as it evolves, but that seems to be a reasonable benchmark.
I just think there should be some flexibility, in the sense that you never know what February 2nd will look like. I said the same thing.
Well, that's true.
Well, that doesn't mean
keep in mind,
it's a benchmark for a decision to be made.
keep in mind that we do have this meeting in between.
Right, we do.
And if something went,
happens.
screwy at that point in time, we do something else.
Right.
So we're not actually foregoing any decision that we might have to make in the interim.
Right.
But I think the focus is simply that everybody is predicting that the peak will occur later this month. In which case, if we do see the peak and we start seeing things drop off, then we feel a lot better about that decision. If in fact it doesn't stop, then again, we have to consider something else.
Right.
Yeah.
And to the mask point, again, like Sarah said, any mask, and Raghu said, any mask is a better protection than no mask. And there is a comfort level to masks. And I know a lot of kids have found the mask that is most comfortable for them, because they are wearing it for a very long time. Same thing for teachers. We've all been wearing these for a couple of years, and we know which ones are comfortable for us. So our ears don't hurt and our nose doesn't hurt at the end of the day. And so
And your glasses don't fog
your
up.
glasses don't fog up, and that you can, breathe properly. And so that is different for every single person, which is why everyone wears different masks. So, rather than telling people what to do, a lot of people have environmental issues with disposable masks, and they're using washable, reusable masks because that's part of their family culture, to be environmentally, conscious about things like that. So there's a great discussion on the Board of Health meeting on masks, and I think it's just something that people can make individual decisions if they want to, double mask or change out their mask at this time. But it's good to know that we have supplies available for students who want to come to school and get a surgical mask or something a little better than maybe what they have. So I think that's great.
Yeah. I'd appreciate Superintendent Bach looking into that about other masks, so that I'm not really someone who really wants to make decisions based on emotion. I really want to base it on data, so it's a kind of a counter to that, but at the same time, it's not that I'm immune to people's emotions or fears. I simply want to follow the data, and I want to analyze the data. I think it's really important the way our Board of Health and our team of nurses has done an extraordinary job analyzing the cases one by one by one, and it's really excessive right now to a point of overload. It's been that way for a while, even before the numbers went up. And it's not like I'm immune to hearing that. It's that I don't want to make decisions based on that. I'd rather add staff. I'd rather add support to help that process or streamline it.
I certainly acknowledge that. We couldn't find people if we needed them. I mean, you look at the shortages, there's I don't speak from a crisis lens, and I don't want to answer the question that way, but, stability is fragile, and I think leadership is the characterization of both the human quality of the feelings attached to the work and the data and how they interact, because we lead people, and people have to make those decisions, families and children and faculty. And I think you guys have done a stellar job with it as a combined team, coming forward with thoughtful decisions, and I think tonight's discussion characterizes that very, very well. Anybody in this district knows and needs to know how much we care about their feelings and what their experience is as professionals in our district and our families and our kids. I think that when people are anticipating a discussion, they can sometimes get fixated on that date, and it can cause added anxiety. And I think if there's anything we've learned about what we're suffering from right now is as much anxiety as we are around the actual impacts of physical illness. So the data around anxiety is a concrete piece, and if we can alleviate, as you as a board, can alleviate anxiety by being clear that your consideration date is a little further down the road, I think you're providing good leadership. But I certainly recognize that all of it has to be based upon data. Anxiety-based data is harder to ascertain. It's emotional, and people give you their personal register. I think the quality of discussion is good. I think the benchmark numbers indicate end of January is the firmest, look at getting in the right direction. If some miracle happens and the precipitous drop in numbers happens, you can always put it on your agenda. But I think, again, you don't want to create uncertainty with people. So I really respect the quality of discussion. I will follow up with the masking information. It looks like Kelly's telling me we have about 20,000 N95s in district right now, which sounds like a lot, but if you're using one a day, that's about a month worth of masks if you want to wear one a day for every, for 700 people generally. So most people are not selecting to take them. I think we're going to end up with an abundance, and we might be able to peel off a portion if there are people that want to access them for students. So things to consider, okay?
Well, thank you very much for that, because I thank her very much. I think that's extraordinary to hear that.
She's pretty amazing, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And so Superintendent Bach, will you take point on just the communication to faculty, students, and families on that February 2nd date? I'm sure not everyone is home right now watching this meeting, so
No,
I'm
that's a
sure
good point. We can put together.
just send out a quick update,
FAQ,
just letting people
yeah.
know they'll stay fully masked till
Thank you.
at least February 2nd.
I might have forgotten.
Yeah, I know.
you.
Just add it to your ever-growing to-do list.
Thank you very much. Yes, I will.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions to that
Yep,
discussion.
appreciate the conversation a lot.
All right, so we're going to move on to accept a donation from Looters Environmental.
All right. You're up, aren't you?
Up there.
Oh, you don't have it? Yeah. It's here. Sorry, we're just acknowledging. Is it in here? Dave and I were cross-referencing. It's an interesting and nice donation. They, for the last several years, have sent a donation that we can use towards any consideration of running the district. And I think that's just a gesture of kindness, and we want to acknowledge it and accept that gift. Typically, David will place that into a general gift fund available to support a student in need or an expenditure that's unanticipated. And I believe, I don't see that they put the amount in there. It's like, it's $50. So you should have to vote accepting that gift. Sorry, I thought they had it in the letter. It was a $50 donation.
I move that we accept the gift from Looters in the amount of $50 with gratitude.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Raghu, for seconding. Any discussion other than thank you so much?
We've received a couple gifts lately, so that's good.
All right, all in favor to accept that donation? Thank you, 5-0. Yes, we thank them very much, and it's nice that they think of the schools each year to donate that money, so thank you, Looters Environmental. It's back to you, Superintendent Bach, for a strategic plan draft review, and I would just like to say that the fact that you're bringing this forward tonight can let everyone know that despite everything going on with COVID and the pandemic and the cases right now, that we all continue to focus on the work of the district, which is educating our students, pre-K to grade 12 and beyond with the borough program. And the strategic plan helps drive that work. So thank you for continuing to work on it and bring it forward here tonight.
Sure, thank you. So I'll make a couple key points, and then what I want to do is give you some guidance on how you can interact with this, and then give you some time to review it over the next, 2 weeks, basically, until our next meeting. And then you could bring back comments. I'll talk about how to facilitate that. So I would say at this point, we're at about the 85 to 90% complete in terms of at least having the core major defined initiatives that we think will fold into the document, and then looking at getting enough eyes on it to begin to add detail, break out timelines, look for repetitiveness, move things around. So right now, we did a good chunk of work on it where we brought all the summer leadership work and folded it into the document. And now I've started to do some additional work on it. At this point today, I was going to do it over vacation, but really opting to protect people's time, held it and pushed it out today to the leadership team, curriculum coordinators, and some other people to begin getting their eyes on it again, to give us feedback. And now it's coming to you, and you as a key group to provide feedback on the document, and I'll tell you how you can do that. A couple of highlights that just for people, and again, you'll get a couple presentations on this as we move toward, and Dana, maybe you should open it. Strategic plan, there we go. Okay, good, thanks, sorry. Overview for people who might be hearing this for the first time. It'll have several core strategic areas of focus, teaching and learning, wellness and relationships, communication, community and connection, management and operations, and facilities. We've grouped those things. There's still some discussion around whether or not things fall in a certain place and how they'll move around. But all of that captures the majority of work that we will focus on in the district. And then under each of those, there's priorities and goals. And so you'll see really the heaviest one will always be teaching and learning. And each of those have a variety of initiatives that you can review. A couple things that we like about the design of this document is that if you go down to the first section on teaching and learning, Daniel, if you'll scroll down, one of the things you're going to find is, one, first of all, you can use the interactive bookmarks to hop you right around in the document, which is a big improvement. And then you'll see the first priority, you start to see more links available in there. So for example, one of our real goals is to make it an interactive document that gives us more capacity to house the things related to the goals, to place reports into there, and to have links for people that are working on projects. So that when I'm doing an update to you, I can actually work within the document to pull up things for you and show you things, and you can look at them yourselves to get a sense of presentations that have been done and reports that were given. We haven't added all of those links yet, but I think we wanted to provide a couple samples. So you see that we have goals that relate to the Climate Action Plan and Sustainable Westborough Committee, and then the master plan that overlap into aspects of our goals around green initiatives. So we've linked those reports there for people who would like to see them. And then there's pieces in here around green initiatives that will break out into two major areas, teaching and learning initiatives, and then down into kind of facilities and implementation work. If we wanted to say, look at composting, you might see pilot up in the teaching and learning phase, but the actual mechanics of purchasing and changing and working on product assessment and managing it would also fall under facilities. So there's some stuff we have to do to make the document work. Right now, where it is that I would imagine that the last 20% will clean it up. We'll add some things, like I know there's things in here that I want to layer in that aren't in here yet, mostly in the facilities area. So if you look at the facility areas, it's very slim right now. And that's because I'll be dropping in those final pieces. We need to do, for example, a new DRA report, the anchor of the building assessment. I'd like to put in a recommendation that we do a fresh one. We might want to consider another enrollment study to anchor the trajectory of the district for the next 5 to 10 years as the last one provided for us. Those are things that I'll fold in that haven't gone in yet. So we'll link the capital reports and things like that will give people data anchors to those facilities pieces. And then I think really and then the rationales will go in at close, and we can look at the composite of, we have those rationales, but it's kind of a refined writing to kind of look at the synopsis of what's left and to decide, how you want to summarize it into how will we be different and better, and why do we think this is important? And that's kind of what you capture in the rationale. And so what I would like to invite you to do right now, when I shared this document to you, I left you in a view only, but this is your version of the document. And after tonight, I'll turn on editing, and you can use suggestions and comments and just put in the thoughts you want to add. They can be things you think about, different initiatives. You can ask questions in the comments section. You can go in and add or edit something, and it will show up as a track change for me. So I open up the document to you for school committee feedback, and you can take your time on that. I'd like to be able to come back and have you add comments. You can summarize your thoughts, and I'll be seeing what you put in there, and we can have a second conversation. And then I should be able to report on the additions that came from the next tier of people looking at it. From here, by the timeline, it goes out to, then it will go to faculty. Again, we slowed that timeline, putting it in front of them before vacation felt tone deaf. We pulled back from that. We'll send it to faculty probably end of January, and they'll go to department meetings. We've been transparent that it will come forward. I mentioned it, and we'll mention it a couple more times to give people readiness, and then share it with them and give them opportunities to review it and give us comments in a Google form. And that follows the trajectory of how we gathered feedback before. We will probably return to some of the original groups that interacted with us. We had done a kind of a parade of visits when we originally garnered feedback from people to different committees and different groups in town. We probably will push it to some of those core groups again and let them, give us feedback so that it also gets a community look again. So that has to be a real finished document, really, before we're asking for that final feedback from people that see it, beyond these samplings. There's other things that will happen to it. I have a thing about prettying it up, and I probably will I'll add photos, we'll pull the W. We'll use the W in some stuff, but we'll add photos. We'll bring it back to the kind of similar quality of the original plan in terms of it capturing the feel of the district. And an opening letter, all that kind of finishing piece. It's kind of sterile right now in the look of it, but we'll bring it to a quality where if people come across it on the website or we share it to someone, it speaks to the quality of the district and the things we value. So that's my report for now, and I take questions, or you can just, hold on to them and dig into the document and interact with me between now and our next school committee meeting, or just go to town in there, put in your thoughts, and you'll be all set.
Thank you. Any?
I guess I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Where there's empty boxes, where there hasn't been a timeline set, is that where you want more feedback, or is it simply that you haven't decided what year that would take place?
Any of those, yeah, they have, it might be that the person that's going to be on point for that hasn't gone in yet and committed. It might be that we haven't, some of them, they did them right away when they were definitive about what the trajectory of them was when they put in the bullet. And then others, they come from final discussion where we look at how much is going on in any one year, and is that logical, and would we move things around? And it's fluid anyway. We move some of those X's year over year, and it's part of my report if we adjust a timeline. I think you want to give feedback across the range of the document and focus. If you feel like you'd like to see a timeline have urgency, I think that's helpful to share. If you feel like, gee, I hope we'll move on this one quickly, something like that. I think more I want, your reaction to just the essence of what we've committed to do over the next, 5 or 6 years.
And another question is, I think you've mentioned it before, but I think it's worth mentioning again, who came up with all, when I read through, I just am, it's extraordinary the number of details of things that we've discussed over the years coming to fruition into the strategic plan, everything from bilingual immersion programs to farm to table to financial literacy to literacy committee. There's so much in it, so I'm curious, who would you, who did all this work? In other words, who's been evaluating all these details besides you and Danielle? Because I think a lot of work went into this.
That's a good question. I think it's important to understand that, like, when we did the original design, the leadership team, the extended leadership team, the 22 people, but then plus all the additional, some of the curriculum coordinators, and we met with Daniel originally when we got feedback, it was right before COVID shut us down, with department heads and brought in feedback. We had some faculty meetings. I visited the groups in town, and everybody gave their ideas about what they thought should be important in the strategic plan. Because we had to hold on the plan, there were things that then we've added since then that have become more relevant or have grown, to completion. But everybody has had their eyes on this. If Daniel wanted to give you a sampling, he'd open the one with all the colored comments, which might be worth just to give them a little picture of if you want to open it up. All of various groups are basically pulling in pieces from their lists and their meetings and then putting them in there. So then I worked with a smaller team of Brian, Sherry, Daniel, and one other person to go in and cross-reference it and make sure they weren't repetitive and to get the language framework similar. So there's lots of people putting that in. It's not like, it's no singular person's plan, and it shouldn't be. It's the characterization of all the feedback we got from, like, there's things in here that I, wouldn't have been on my list that are on someone else's list, or there's things that everybody was like, this has to be a big priority. And so I would say it's a mix of everybody's input over 2 years. Yeah. And each year we update it, which is the other thing, things will rise to the surface and we'll add things to it through a process.
It's extraordinary. When people go to look at this, the details of wanting, when I look at it as a whole, I just think the number of improvements and opportunities wanting to give to students and faculty to do tremendous work is what it's made up of. Mm-hmm. So the things that people have been talking about for many years that they bring to our attention, a lot of it's in it. Everything from civics and social studies update and world language update and pieces that every single department sort of is in this to say, what can we do better? How can we improve?
Yeah, that's an interesting initiative if you actually look at the title of what that priority is. So under teaching and learning, we actually created a priority to house a place for like feedback that comes in. Because you get people that will say, hey, I care about this, will you look at it? And you want people to feel like, one, that's not random, whatever people ask us doesn't just go in, but there's a process for saying, we've heard this a couple times, or there's clearly a movement to make sure we revisit our civics and make sure it's appropriately scoped across the district. So there needs to be a place in the document where we can add an evolving interest or feedback we receive. The financial literacy one has popped up multiple times.
Yeah.
And as well as training people for civic duty and going back to helping people understand town meeting. You get the feedback from people, and so that priority gave us a place to house it, and I think it will evolve with, the input we get from people. So that one's kind of
The other
interesting.
question from a school committee member point of view is, what's this going to cost me? And, I think the word you used is really apropos, which is, it's an evolving school system. Will evolve and grow, and it won't necessarily be more expensive. It will just be that you'll offset certain aspects of it to do better things. And so I don't see it as, it has a price tag attached to it, but people will ask that. They'll say, if you're going to give this opportunity, what are you going to let go of? And maybe you will, because you'll evolve into something else. And so I look at it that way, but I think people will ask it.
Yeah, sure.
But it's extraordinary work, and I kudos to the leadership team, the department heads, all that went into it. It's a great document, and I see it coming to fruition, and it's pretty great.
Yeah, you've got to see it go from chart paper with sticky notes all over it to an electronic document, so.
Yeah, I think, one last piece on that too, as we look at that trajectory, is that, everybody has really done a good job to put their personal voice in there. And the other important benchmark we use is, if we put it in there, we will attain a resolution on what's in there. Some are proposed as explore, which means we're not even sure we want to do them, but we want to discuss them. Some are complete, make, do. So the verb matters. And I think we're thoughtful about that. And then it also directs where we don't put our priorities. So it's an important document to look at what's missing and to make sure that you understand that when somebody says, I want you to do this, the mission of the district is guided by this document, and therefore we won't be drawn off mission, because otherwise you risk just the randomization of following all the things that come at you. So it doesn't mean we can't add things, but it gives us a voice to say, this is the direction where budget expenditures will go. This is the direction where, and if you want to see the commitment to that, you got to look back at the old one and see what's there that's now been done. And I think that's where you get a sense of the quality and the power of the document. It is the paper trail that gives us a way to walk. It grounds a lot of our PD and other things, and it just gives a reassurance to people that we have a plan. So I think one important quality is that many districts hire consultants to do this for them. And I just want to say, I'm very proud of the fact that we developed our own. We looked at a lot of ones that were done by professional companies and created a structure that followed a lot of that planning. But this is a district leadership team that wanted it to be their document to speak to the quality of the district, and also didn't feel we needed to spend that money because they owned it and wanted to own it. So I'm immensely proud of their work and their commitment for this document to represent their focus. So.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Great. We're going to move on to discuss a proposed change to the March 1st professional development date, and it's something that Dr. Mayer had brought to my attention and asked to have this put onto our agenda. And it's, we sort of were like, why didn't we see this? But February break seems to me very late in February, so maybe that's why. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of factors that when we were setting the calendar for the last several years, we have put the second, it was the first Tuesday of March as a PD day. And it coincided with town elections, which was all convenient for the schools to be closed on that day, for their helping for the town officials and also for the public to go in and to vote. So when we were running buses and having students in the building. And what happened this year is not only did the election, it looks like it was moved. I don't know what happened, but it's on the second Tuesday. And because February vacation is so late, this year, the first day back for students after February break would be the day before our professional development day. And so parents teachers and students all, sort of an inconvenient time to get momentum back.
Doesn't feel good.
You have one day back from vacation, and then the school closes, and the kids go, have like more vacation, I guess, for a day. It's not a wise design, and we think it would be much more beneficial all the way around for the town election, for the students, parents, and teachers if we moved it by 1 week and had it on the day that we will have town election.
So that date would be March
That's our proposal, is March,
8th or 9th? I'll have to
make
look.
sure. Yeah, March 8th. So, I'm not sure whether you're voting or considering, but that's our proposal.
Thank you. Yeah, typically we consider it for like 2 weeks and then vote, but I don't know if we just want to have a discussion about it now since it's just moving like a day.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And to Daniel's point, I think it's funny to come back from break for 1 day and then have a PD day. I think we get more feedback on that than the actual changing of the date that maybe people don't even know it's on there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's far out enough that if people had arranged childcare or something for that day, hopefully this would provide enough time to switch that.
Yes.
I mean, you may have a couple of families that'll say, oh, I bought tickets to come back on Tuesday.
They'll just miss a couple
But-
extra days. That's
Yep.
fine. Okay, well, I would make a motion to change the March 1st professional development date in the school calendar to March 8th.
I second.
Any other discussion?
I really think our intent was to have it on Election Day. I think I remember actually asking for it during our discussion. And why? Because we have a parking issue during Election Day in the high school parking lot. And I think it didn't become an issue when we switched the voting to town hall temporarily during COVID. And I was trying to bring it back because voting could be in the high school. And if that was true, we had a problem the year before COVID. We had a problem with people getting to the polls because there was snow in the parking lot, creating less spaces, and for people who had a harder time walking to the high school, it was really problematic. People would show up at the voting booth and then drive away. They didn't come and vote, and it was an issue. So we had talked about in the future trying to coordinate this professional development day with the election to simplify that process and help the town, and
Yep.
yeah.
So now we'll do it. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that is 5-0, so we'll make that change, and you can put that on your list to communicate out to families and staff and faculty. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is to vote to approve a request for an international trip to France, Germany, and the Alps in April of 2023.
So, let me just get back.
You can come on up to the desk, yeah, welcome.
Oh, hello, I didn't see you come in. I'm like all absorbed in my notes. I'm so happy. I was going to try to cover it.
You were going to wing it for me?
I was very committed. All right, we'll let you do it.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, just make sure you speak right into the microphone, only because folks at
Thanks.
home want to be able to hear about this amazing trip.
How's this? Good?
That's perfect.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. My name's Susan Smith, and I happily teach English at the high school. I wanted to propose an international trip tonight for April 2023, COVID willing. The trip is during April vacation to France, Germany, and the Alps for 9 days. I picked this trip because it has a good variety of activities and places. I think there's been a desire for travel since 2020. I wanted students who study French in school to have the chance to be in a French-speaking country, and I've also heard from firsthand experience that the Alps excursions are amazing. I think overall this trip is a great enrichment opportunity for students, culturally, historically, and if you think about it, even collaboratively. Traveling in a group is a very collaborative activity. Overall, I think it's a very worthwhile opportunity for students. The trip cost is $3,945 for the 9 days, and the trip is through Education First Tours, or EF Tours, which is a company that we've run trips through for many years now, pretty reliably. And that's the overview.
Yeah.
I like this trip too, because one of the things that Brian was saying was that I like the way we were diversifying them so that they have a language focus, but they also have cultural immersion focus, and you have the ones that have some of the science focus. So what we want is trips that open the many pathways for students who want to travel to feel invited and included in parts of that trip. And I think that's a real improvement to some of the design that you guys are bringing to it. That's neat.
Yes.
Yeah, the itinerary is you're going to be busy. You're going to cover a lot on this trip.
Yes, I've read a lot about all the reviews, and to some extent, it's, a teenager pace.
Sure.
Also, there are long bus rides, so it's possible some of those times will even out some sleeping on the bus and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a really, like the superintendent said, a great mix of culture, history.
This description also included some food samples, which I enjoyed.
The food.
Yeah, France and Germany gave you some sample meals, which we don't get that all the time. I liked it.
Yeah.
Great. Sounds good.
One of the things that we've always suggested, or I have suggested, I guess, in regards to the travel, is that sometime during the period that you're there, that our kids get an opportunity to talk to their compatriots in whatever country you're in. I'm sure with this agenda, you might only be able to do that once, but I think one of the things about travel, particularly travel to the various places that our kids have been able to go, is they get an experience that you can't get any other way, which is to see and hear what other people do in the world and what their problems are. And the only way you actually get that experience is to have a few hours where the kids could get together with some maybe local class somewhere in the process, because it's through that interchange of information where they all of a sudden realize our introverted look at how we live in this country is totally different. And Mark Twain has a very good quote about the fact that one way that you get rid of all kinds of problems is to travel, because then you experience that, in fact, either you have the same ideas and concerns as other people in the world, or alternatively, you see that everybody has something, and perhaps everybody is different but the same. So I would suggest that somehow or another you try to work that into the program as well.
They do have some options for those kinds of exchanges in some of the trips. So we have some leverage because we do a lot of trips through this company, so it's a possibility that we could work something like that in. As it is now, I think the closest to a real cultural exchange with locals is the Alps. So there are two extra activities that I chose on purpose. They're optional. And I think, I mean, it sounds slightly cliche, the Swiss fondue evening, but I have heard that that's where students really have a good time and actually, get immersed in the culture, even if it's a little bit, what you'd expect. But it is a lot of interaction with the local people those nights, and I think that's one of the reasons I've heard that those two activities are very memorable for the people that have done these trips.
Yeah, so you'll be staying overnight in the Alps in some travel lodge or something like that?
Yeah, there's the Swiss Alps experience, I think, involves the mountains, and the fondue evening is a cultural dinner with, again, it might be a little cliche, but the long horns that are played and those sorts of things, and maybe some dancing, those kinds of things where the students really participate and get involved with doing those kinds of cultural things. But I can check about maybe,
Particularly kids
maybe in
they're
Paris.
their own age,
Right.
rather than the guys that blow those.
Yes, yes.
I mean, they're my age.
Yeah, I can ask about that.
Thanks.
I'm a big supporter of these trips. I think that it allows students to expand their minds and be inspired by the world beyond our country. And so I'm a big supporter of this. The only question I had, which happened with the last trip that was brought to us, which is making it very clear what the voucher expiration date is for if you had to change.
Yes.
Based on the potential that COVID is still lurking around us in a way that would prevent this, and whether insurance covers it or whether you have seniors who are not going to be around to change something around based on that. That was the question came up last time, just to make sure people know what they're signing up for. Just, there have been so many changes in the last couple of years, and when this hit and those trips were canceled, I think it was pretty hard on a lot of families to accept that there wasn't an easy way out of the contract. So
Yeah, there were some options, and they were confusing options, and there were vouchers or refunds or combinations. I hadn't thought about checking on the seniors who might enroll, and that's a really good point. I was going to write it down, but I didn't.
it wouldn't be this seniors, because they'll be out of school by then, but it
Right.
would be your juniors or, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the discussions that we had as a result of those cancellations, was the idea that the company would allow a transfer, let's say, of a senior who was dispossessed, if you will, of their ticket, to be able to have the new plan use that as a credit and pay the money that they would otherwise have paid to the company to reimburse that other family. Maybe there's an insurance program that you could create to do that?
I did actually, I asked about, because I had a trip that was canceled. I only had 5 students, so it was a little bit less complicated. But I did ask the, our agent this time about whether they've made cancellations and refunds and vouchers and changes more restrictive. And she said that they have made it more easy to have these things come up and be okay. That's not the most eloquent way to put it, but I did ask her about that, thinking that maybe they were tightening their fist a little bit since they had had some difficulties with their whole business. But she said actually they've tried to make it less of an issue if travel is disrupted or canceled or those things. So I don't know all the details, but I feel that they are as good as they were and better. I'm not sure how much better, but I did talk to her about that, because I do remember there was a 40-day time frame, and I was on day 39, and the principal helped me make sure that all my students, I think the other trip got word in before the 40-day limit, and I had just, and it was like Friday the 13th before school closed and everything. It was all very hectic. So I do remember that and know about being aware of those things.
I think, too, the most important thing is just whatever the circumstances are, whatever the trip provides. I mean, EF does what EF does, but people need to know when they sign up what those parameters are. And just really emphasizing it to the families and students around, you know, what flexibility they do have in that commitment, and that would be helpful. But it's an exciting trip.
Whatever it turns out, you know, disclosure is the best thing.
Yes.
That way, if disaster strikes, at least they all were warned.
And is there a minimum amount of students you need to run the trip or that you'll take, or?
Yes, I would say the minimum is 5.
Yeah.
The other trip got a lot of response, the Costa Rica trip. So it seems like what they usually do is they get the approval, then they advertise for a meeting. They already set a date for the meeting so that the folks who didn't make it, the other trip had a cap of about 24, I think. So the folks who wanted to do that trip but couldn't were directed to the meeting for this trip.
Okay, great.
Even though we hadn't worked out the details. So they just know when the meeting is. And I think about 30 people have RSVP'd for that meeting. So it is something to think about what the maximum is.
That's what I was going to ask you. That was my next
Yeah,
question. You know, if you have to create a wait list, or I'm sure, you know, it kind of, lots of people are interested. Who actually can, move forward with it is a smaller number, but
Exactly.
yeah, so I guess just thinking about as, people have that desire to get back to travel, and we are offering these amazing trips, what would be the process for like a cap for how many people you feel like would be comfortable, how many students to be comfortable to take and chaperone and stuff, and then do you create a wait list and how that works?
Exactly. I have been thinking about what seems comfortable for a maximum. I also know I checked with the principal about what he thinks about a cap, or about whether if we offer the trips first to seniors and juniors.
Yeah. Yep.
So we're still working out some of that.
Sure.
And I think, it would be great to have as many as want to come. However, being in charge, I want to be a little bit conservative. I'm thinking 18 to 24
Yeah.
maximum.
Yeah. I know.
There will be other chaperones, but still, I haven't made a final determination, but that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, Dr. Ryan has said that he took a large trip one time, a large group, and felt it was best to keep the group on the smaller side. Yeah.
Yeah, buses. He had 2 buses. And apparently,
It's
two
really
is
hard.
one too many.
Too many heads to count before you.
Yeah, in Europe, the European trips, the buses are 40. So you do not need to fill a bus. And so I imagine, let's say I have 18, what they do is they take like 22 people from other schools and make a bus that way. So
okay.
that's why they can be really flexible about how many go, because they'll fill it in with other schools
Okay,
that have a different amount. So yeah,
nice.
all things to really nail down a little bit before the meeting. So I'll be working with the tour guide and probably with Mr. Callahan before that.
Well, thank you for bringing the trip forward and, putting yourself out there to take kids.
I know, I always think the chaperones are a little brave. I'm impressed by your bravery.
It's a lot of work. It really is. It's a tremendous responsibility and a lot of work. It's enjoyable in the sense that it's fulfilling to see what they get from the trips, but it is a huge responsibility to take, children out internationally. And so I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
I have 2 things.
Yes.
One is that there's a new airline started in Iceland, and they are booking trips to Europe for $300 round trip. So you might want to check into that. By the time you get there, they should either have failed or done well, one or the other.
Exactly.
And I think the last thing that I've always said when we have people come before us is that, at least personally, and I think the school committee as well, likes to hear the students come and tell us about the trip that they took, and in fact, give us a report of what they learned when they were there. Particularly from a cultural point of view, and even more specifically about what it meant to them, and whether it expanded their view of things or not. So, thanks.
That sounds like a good plan.
Thank you for doing this. These are the kind of things that change kids' lives, and they make such a difference. But do we need to make a motion? Yeah?
Yep, go ahead.
I make a motion to approve the request for the international field trip to France, Germany, the Alps in April of 2023.
I'll second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, that is approved. So I'll sign the paperwork and I'll get the superintendent to sign it, and then you're off with your meetings, and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sue, for
Thank you.
coming in. Thank you very much.
Great. We are now at the Assabet Valley Collaborative second quarterly report, and there were a couple documents in there to take a look at.
So because they were a little delayed in sending reports, I feel like I've been giving you meaningful updates on the development of the trajectory of their work. This just actually gives you their final annual report and an update of the financial statement, and I think provides an overview. Again, we talked about the structural gap they had in their busing costs, and that was picked up in the audit and as part of the overall financial statement. I think they were transparent and clear. They had suffered from a transition in really not having a business manager for an extended amount of time. We're using contracted support, and I think they just had gaps in such a complex transportation year. So none of us on the board felt that it was indicative of, an area of weakness that we thought was poor management. We think it was really more a combination of issues that they were struggling with. I think they closed the gap quickly. They did get some recovery of funds, and you can see that in some of their report. And the gap was much smaller than they thought it would be. They're in good fiscal standing in the sense that they have available capacity of savings, and they keep it, there's a cap, of course, they can't go over like that 20%. They can't have more than their total cost in their carryover year to year, and they're always up near that top, so they're fiscally sound. They're moving forward on the development of new programming and the addition of a space for their 18 to 22-year-old program where they need to have, more vibrant space. That is delayed because of construction choices. It's in the corporate setting. It's in like an office building, and they're going to remodel the interior. And the cost is just escalated, of course, because of relations to where we're going with COVID. So they slowed down some of that work. I think overall, though, I find it to be a dynamic and growing organization, and I think you can see in that annual report that they survived a very tough stretch. Collaboratives were struggling during that time period. And I feel good about where we are. And so my report is just to be in the record, and you can look at those. And if you see them and you have questions, it's probably a more relevant offline conversation since most people watching aren't going to understand it. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Steve?
Not a question, I guess, just a comment that even through all the troubles that they had, they still had a net surplus of over $2 million.
Yeah.
So that was good to see, but it did bring up a question, and that is, let's say they did go negative, that in fact they didn't have the funds to cover their expenses. What's the liability of each participant to cover, let's say, a shortfall? Do you have enough?
Well, they would have, that's one of the reasons why we track them very closely, because we have a commitment in terms of the amount of payment we do. They would have to bill the schools additional cost in order to cover programming costs. I think that's why you're looking for that buffer of operational costs to be carried, so you know that they can survive dips in enrollment in different programs. I think that, and again, Asset Valley's been really stable that way for multiple years. But yes, the trajectory would be, which is why we are her board, as the superintendents of districts and the fiscally responsible for our budgets and bringing them, and that's why we report to you that, should something like that occur, if there was a change, it would be billed against the districts to cover the gap until they could either close, recover, or do what they need. In some cases, a collapse actually leads to them having to give you money back. There's usually a gap in the other way because they end services. That's what EDCO suffered. I see AVCs in a very stable place. I think that their programming is getting always better, and Kathy Cummings is a very strong leader with a strong leadership team. So I think they'll be in a good place, and they've continued to grow. One of the things we watch with them, though, Steve, is the fact that a lot of their revenue is driven from transportation, and it's so volatile right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I guess I would, just for the benefit of the discussion, acknowledge that I think a year or two ago, they returned to us excess funds to reduce our costs because of that cap that you were talking about. So it isn't just a one-way street, that we benefit when they succeed, and they have succeeded historically.
Yep.
So, no, I was glad to see the report. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Right. The next meeting of the school committee will be Wednesday, January 19th. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Good night.